For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis of USC's 13th practice of spring camp. Now, Shotgun, I don't think we can start to describe this practice without mentioning injuries. When you look at Rehab Island and other guys standing around on the sideline, so many injuries. Rehab Island was definitely booked full today.
Yeah, definitely. You could have put together almost a full squad over there. If Mo Hassan was out here, you would have had a quarterback and then had pretty much every other position. But yeah, definitely a ton of injuries right now. By my count, at the end of practice, they had 40 guys unavailable. Now, not all of those are injuries. There's some guys like Keenan Kristen that aren't with the team. You know, some guys like Caleb Tremblay that have entered the transfer portal that aren't with the team. But 40 scholarship players that were not available to practice at the end of it. So it's been a little bit of a hodgepodge of first team, second team. The defense, it actually felt like you went from first team to third string.
Yeah.
Pretty quick. There was a big drop off with just not having the bodies that you would have normally at some of the positions. You know, in particular, the wide receiver and cornerback positions. You had 3 scholarship wide receivers available for the full practice, and then Kyle Ford as well for individual. You had 2 scholarship cornerbacks, so really thin at those positions. Guys, they're mixing and matching a little bit, putting Zamarion Gordon out there, doing some different things to try to mix some guys in. But yeah, definitely a ton of bodies down right now, and so that I think it limited what they were able to do. They were in full pads today, but we didn't see much tackling.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What did you take away from the full practice? Because it looked like it was thud, it wasn't full tackling, and because you have such limited bodies, what were they able to do?
It was, a lot of 7-on-7 and individual work was the biggest thing. They did a ton of individual work throughout the day. Didn't do as much teamwork at the end. There were a couple of drives towards the end. 7-on-7, they had 3 drives basically. Each quarterback got 1. Keaton Slovis's was a little bit longer. It just felt like everything was a little bit shorter as far as the number of reps that they were getting, and I think that's just because we don't have 30 guys that we want to get reps for. We have 25 or we have 20, so let's get as many quality reps as we can in before everybody gets tired, and then just call it a day and be happy with it.
And because of those limited numbers, we actually saw more shuffling on USC's offensive line today. We noted on Saturday that Liam Jimmons came out with what looked like an ankle injury, so we saw Jalen McKenzie shift inside to right guard, and then Jonah Monheim getting time at right tackle. What do you take away from that first team group that we saw today?
It's an interesting mix, and I think that it's one that they may explore a little bit more because they really like what Jonah Monheim has done. We've seen him at left tackle a little bit. We've seen him at right tackle. Can he bump his way into that starting lineup? And if he does, maybe you like him more at right tackle, and therefore you move Jalen McKenzie because he has played that guard position. The thing is they do have some versatile pieces on the offensive line. Those 2 guys can play inside-outside. Cortland Ford obviously has played inside-outside. Andrew Voorhees, we saw him a little bit at left tackle today, primarily at left guard where he's been throughout the spring. But at the end of practice, we did see Cortland Ford actually was being checked out and was not available for the last couple of plays. Don't know if it's anything serious, but was being checked out by the trainers. So a little bit of concern there. Could be another body down on the offensive line. They did get Liam Douglas back today with that second unit, though he's very ginger on his foot. So he's coming back from an ankle injury, trying to get some work in the last week. But yeah, definitely still mixing and matching, and a big part of it is the injuries right now. But I think it's interesting to see Jalen McKenzie playing that guard position, which tells you he hasn't locked up the right tackle spot, and they're still going to be looking at some different options.
Yeah, before spring camp started, I think we would have anticipated more shuffling on the left side of USC's offensive line, but I feel like we've seen more at the end of camp, more shuffling on the right side of the line.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of seen a little bit of everything. You've seen Cortland Ford play some left and right. You've seen Jonah Monheim left and right. So I think both of those tackle positions are still open. They're still going to take that competition into the spring. Now, I think they're confident that you have Brett Nealon at center. You have Andrew Voorhees at left guard if you want him there. And then you likely have Jalen McKenzie at one of those right side spots as well. And then the question marks kind of open up. With Liam Jimmons, you need to see a little bit more. And him being out injured is a little bit of a detractor there for me. You want to see him out there making some more plays to solidify his spot. But I feel like the right side, they don't have enough confidence in it to say, yeah, Liam Jimmons is going to be your right guard. And Jalen McKenzie is going to be our right tackle. They still are leaving those competitions up in the air. And I think those will come down to fall camp, and we'll see if one of those second-year freshmen can bump their way into that starting rotation.
And then where does Justin Dietz fit into this? I mean, Andrew Millick went down as USC second-team center, so Justin Dietz has filled in that role. Does that hurt his opportunities elsewhere?
I mean, it's an interesting thing because we've seen him mostly at left guard when he's been in there. Today, when Andrew Voorhees bumped out to left tackle, Justin Dietz came in at left guard. And so I think it depends on what they want to do with Andrew Voorhees, whether Justin Dietz, will play that left guard spot. If they decide to bump Andrew Voorhees out, I think that would be their first option, is to put Justin Dietz there. But if not, do they start getting him reps, in the fall camp, at the beginning of fall camp, at the right guard spot, and then see if he's in that competition. So, yeah, I think it's still a lot of moving pieces on the offensive line. I don't think we came out of the spring camp and said, okay, we know what's going to happen on that offensive line. I think just as many questions as we had coming in. I think maybe even a little bit more than we had coming in.
It seemed like the coaches knew that they weren't going to have an answer in spring camp. It seemed like it was just like getting people on tape for the summer to evaluate and then go into fall camp.
Yeah, and we'll see where these guys develop, in the off season and going into the fall camp. There's no one that really has stood out as like they've had an amazing camp. I would say the guy that stands out is probably having the best camp and maybe has worked his way into that first group is Jonah Monheim. Yeah. He's a guy that's been talked about in a positive light by multiple coaches, and some of the defensive linemen as well. As a guy that stood out to them. So we'll see if he's a guy that can continue. And remember a couple of spring camps ago when Liam Jimmons made that first transition, big jump from beginning to end of spring camp, and then a big jump again in fall camp. Can someone take that, that step and make a big jump in fall camp to take over a starting position? That's what we're going to have to be watching. But again, it's a competition that's going to continue all the way until probably the week before they open up the season.
Mm-hmm. Now, USC has 2 more practices left. We're anticipating that they won't be in full pads just based on the limit that the NCAA gives each team. So let's go off what the defensive coaches say. Full pad practices are the only ones that count. And so if that's the case, Shotgun, this kind of wraps up spring camp. What has been your overall evaluation of this camp?
I mean, I think that they definitely instilled that physical mentality. I think that that's something that they were trying to really work at, and I think they did a good job of it. The difference in the practice plans where it wasn't the same routine over and over, I thought they did a really good job on the coaching staff of mixing things in and finding different ways to get, the guys involved, get them hyped up, get them going, and I think the fact that they didn't have a spring camp last year. I think the players didn't take anything for granted either, and I think they came out there and gave their all. The fact that you have a bunch of injuries at the end is a little bit disconcerting, but only 3 season ending. Now, that's still a lot, but, I think you feel confident that pretty much everyone else should be back and ready to go on fall camp, so I don't think there's some big, there's no big alarm going off, no sirens going on in the background to tell you that, that there's a big concern about how you went about this practice. I think they should be pretty confident in the way that they've instituted their practices and the results that it's had so far. Now, what they've done in the spring and going against each other doesn't mean anything when you face somebody else and they punch you in the face. So we'll still have to figure that part out once the season starts and when USC faces another opponent. But I think so far, they've done what they could do as far as building the culture and building that physical aspect, which obviously is something they need.
Mm-hmm. I know you were a little skeptical about the configuration of having spring camp or the spring game in the middle of spring camp. What did you take away from the second half of camp?
I think just more mixing and matching, and that's something that they talked that they were going to do. We didn't see it the first 3 weeks before the spring game, a little bit in the spring game because of some injuries and because of the draft that they had. But that's what the last 2 weeks is kind of the denouement of the spring camp, was just mixing some guys up and seeing what everyone can do. And it's just kind of a different way to go about it. Now, maybe if they had the spring camp at the end of practice, spring game at the end of the camp, then maybe they would have done it, flip that and done that the first couple weeks. But instead, you're instilling that physical culture, that physical nature. You're doing that the first couple weeks. So I think it worked out in that regard, that they were able to, create that physicality, create that mentality, and then work it into the spring game. And now we're still getting the work in that we wanted to get in.
Mm-hmm. One notable thing out of today's practice, maybe not very important, but at least interesting, was that we saw some coaches get in on the action. We saw Kerry Colbert wearing Brew McCoy's jersey and a helmet. He had a rep as a wide receiver. Still has some speed, I'll say that. And then Dante Williams as a DB, yes?
Yeah, you saw both of the coaches. And again, we noted that there were 2 scholarship cornerbacks available and 3 scholarship wide receivers. So the coaches got out there and went against some of the players, and Gary Colbert took a couple of reps. There was a deep ball that he wasn't able to get to on a throw from Keaton Slovis. But there was another ball going against Chris Steele that Chris Steele had a beat on, nearly got an interception, but Gary Colbert comes away with it, and he chucked the ball at Chris Steele's feet at the end of it to say, I still got it. I still can make some plays. But Dante Williams went up against Katie Nixon, and Katie Nixon blew by him and got the touchdown on it. I don't know if he was warmed up. I'm giving a little bit of leeway here. Say he wasn't warmed up, wasn't ready to go full speed.
Great on the curve, I guess. Alrighty, Shotgun, any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No, I think it's interesting that the way the camp has progressed and the way that the game was in the middle of the season. So we'll see how this carries over, because you kind of slowed down a bit the last 2 weeks of the season. How does it progress into summer? Do you ramp it back up? Can Bobby Steiner and the boys get them going? Such a great name. I don't understand what the problem is there. No, we'll see what they can do in the summer and how they continue the momentum leading into fall camp and how those player run workouts, all that stuff that has to go on in the off season. Is everyone taking care of their business on their P's and Q's? Those will all those small things will add up when it comes to fall time. And I think they've put in the initial steps. They've made, they've started their way towards being a more physical team, but it's got to continue in the spring, from the spring to the summer to the fall. It can't be, we did it in the spring camp for 3 weeks, and then we cut it out. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how they continue to build on this and if they can continue to do that.
Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's 13th practice of its 2021 spring camp. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.